It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to the roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig, here without Kyle Fellows again this week, but we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking out our channel on YouTube or the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. And last week, if you tuned in, I discussed some recommendations to fix the New Orleans Saints cap situation and their roster. And I thought that that would be a nice transition into talking about another team and kind of a similar cap situation, that being the Cleveland Browns. And I think when you take a look at the roster, we sort of identified the Saints are probably not in a position to really seriously compete for a championship right now. And so how can they tear things down in a way that is sustainable for the future and not having to keep pushing money out in the future? And the Browns are sort of on the precipice of that as well, although really dominated by one particular bad decision that we'll get into in a moment. But the first thing I think we need to do is figure out, could this team compete in 2025? And if you take a look at what Vegas thinks, they are projecting the Browns at 4.5 wins. So the expectations are that they're going to be really bad. And I think sometimes you take a look and they have some really top-notch players, talking about Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, and they have some really good players as well. And you see a path to this team maybe being a little bit better than that 4.5 wins. But even sniffing the playoffs, much less being an actual contender, seems pretty far-fetched at this point. And the Browns are already, they're already going to have $22.5 million in dead cap for 2026, which makes them a projected $8 million over the cap. And here's where I think they can make some moves. If they're responsible the rest of 2025, they can roll over about $22.5 million in cap space. And there's also the potential, of course, of another cap increase that exceeds the current projection. So that's enough to make up for the $16.5 million over the cap and sign a draft class and fill your roster. I misspoke there. They're $8 million projected over the cap, but then you factor in they're gonna have to sign a rookie class. They probably have a few contracts that a few free agents that they maybe need to take a look at, maybe just filling out the roster with some lower tier kind of free agents. But that's going to allow you to do that. But that whole philosophy involves tightening your belt in a way the Browns just have not done in the last 4 years. They are the number one cash spending team over the last 4 seasons. And I think, they're very willing to push this money out, and that has caused some issues for their current roster. Obviously, the biggest concern, no matter what, is what do you do with Deshaun Watson? He is clearly not the answer at quarterback. And even if he was, I don't know that Cleveland really wants him around their locker room. So he's set to count, get this, $80.7 million against the cap in 2026 and has a potential $131 million dead cap hit. So those numbers seem fake, but they're just not. And a pre-June 1st cut would cost the Browns $50 million more than they would save. So, right, I already said he's going to count $80.7 million against the cap in 2026. That's, unless they push more money out, which I genuinely do not recommend, that's what he's going to count. If they cut him before June 1st, he would count $131 million against the cap. That's basically half of your salary cap space. You can't do that. It would make it impossible to field an actual roster. So I think a post-June 1st cut, while it saves them nothing in 2026, and it's going to count that $50 million then against their 2027 cap, is probably the best way to go, because they've already pushed that money out. They can't save it. The only other option is adding more void years at the end, and that is just more irresponsible than they need to be given their current roster makeup. I would say at this point, a post-June 1st cut is a near guarantee. As an aside to all of this, if you're trying to look for a worst contract in all of American sports history, I don't know that there's even competition at this point for the Deshaun Watson deal. It is truly organizational destroying, and that's not even factoring in the draft compensation. So like you can argue this is one of the worst trades ever. If you want to talk about um, Herschel Walker or something to that effect. Okay, I mean, I guess you could argue because the draft compensation was so ridiculous, but this is going to go down as one of the worst moves of modern sports history. Period. Um, so I think all of that aside, I would still advocate for the cut. You just take the $80.7 million hit in the chin in 2026. You can sustain that. You just can't add a lot of players if you're going to do that. So I think you have to decide, and this is why I think maybe Joe Flacco starts the season in 2025. He can't start the whole season. They have to figure out what Dylan Gabriel and or Shedeur Sanders are this year, because you're going to have to make a decision. You're probably going to be really bad. This is projected to be a pretty good starting quarterback class. So you have to figure out, are Sanders or Gabriel one of the answers? And if not, great, then draft one. But you need to figure that out, because that is how you're going to plan your offseason moves. I think the Browns, on the surface, they're going to have to let most of the free agents walk this upcoming offseason. And you're talking about two phenomenal career guards in Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. You have tight end David Njoku, center Ethan Pocic, cornerback Greg Newsome. Those are really the big names. And ideally, you don't want to leave a young quarterback with an entirely new interior offensive line. So maybe you can get something done with Pocic. I don't recommend bringing back the other two. One or both may retire anyways, but you're going to have to be very economical in how you're going to structure your roster. And I don't think you're going to be able to bring back a bunch of your own free agents unless you're pushing money out. And again, that's what we're trying to avoid in this simulation, this scenario. So I think, you may increase some advocacy to run it back with like a Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel in 2026. Even if you draft a top quarterback, let them deal with the offensive line problems that you're likely going to have, and then transition your quarterback in later in the year if you feel like the offensive line is okay. And if not, let them sit for a full season. And we talked about this with the Saints last week, but really the Browns could field a very large draft class in 2026. Some of those veterans that I talked about, those are trade candidates at the deadline, right? If the Browns are out of it, look to move some of those players. Greg Newsome, the guards, anybody should be on the block. And fill the rest of the roster with UDFAs and really follow the hard reset the Rams attempted in 2023. And the Rams ended up being much better than anybody would have thought in 23. But try that hard reset, be as cheap as possible. Don't push money forward because you're already going to have troubles in 2027. And you'll figure out maybe one of Sanders or Gabriel is the answer at quarterback, but maybe the rookie is ready to go. And you're going to have an opportunity to assess this roster because you have a bunch of low risk minimum contract free agents. You're also going to give your young players a lot of time to develop. And then here is the sunshine at the end of the tunnel. Now, it's not as drastic as the Saints, who can basically wipe all of their dead cap hits off in one season. But in 2027, the Browns could have a projected $75 million in cap space. And that's even with that $50 million hit from Watson still on the books. And they could take some swings in free agency. I said that wrong. In 2026, the Browns could have $75 million in cap space. And that's with that $50 million cap hit. Then in 2027, you really open up your cap situation because now all of the dead cap holds are off for Deshaun Watson. Again, you can play as many young players as you want, see if you have something going with there. You can extend those players out or have them on cheap contracts. You're also going to be able to, extend your other players because you're going to have more wiggle room. You'll start to be able to bring in external free agents in 26 and then probably even more in 27. And I was a little bit critical of the Browns draft strategy this year. I loved trading down from 2 and what they were able to acquire. Of course, they have 2 first-round picks next year, potentially 2 decent first-round picks, right? Their own, which should be pretty good in Jacksonville, and we don't know what Jacksonville is at this point. So those are going to be really great ammunition. I thought they could have traded down more. I thought there were another move or two, and I did an entire show about this. So if you want to go back, it's like 4 shows ago to see what I had proposed the Browns could do. And I didn't totally understand bringing back Myles Garrett on a huge contract when they could have traded him. So right now, I'm a little critical of the way the Browns have approached this because they're sort of like half in, half out. And I think they need to be all the way out and then work forward. I think they could have gotten some much better draft capital for Myles Garrett than the value of an aging edge rusher is going to bring him. But I understand he's a franchise guy. He's an all-time Browns player. So cool. But you still have a way forward. And I think this is it. And if their ownership can be committed to a couple of rough seasons, it is a way to fix the roster to take them out of mediocrity or even below mediocrity for the foreseeable future. So that's my plan. If you have something that you think the Browns should do, make sure you leave it in the comments if you have some other ideas for moves that they can make. Happy to hear those and chat about it. But I really appreciate you joining me. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show as we continue to discuss roster building and begin to preview the 2026 NFL Draft in the coming weeks. From the draft room to the gridiron, Draft Fellas have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah you know.